The grease jar sat on the back of the stove like a sacred thing, dark, warm, and never empty. Your grandmother cooked with it every day, and the doctor told her she was killing her family. Science finally caught up. Here are 30 banned soul food techniques scientists now say were brilliant. That cast iron skillet never left the stovetop. She fried eggs in it at dawn, seared pork chops at noon, and baked cornbread in it come evening. The same pan, same seasoning built up over decades. Doctors warned families to throw out the heavy iron and switch to non-stick coated in chemicals. They said the old skillets were unsanitary. What they never mentioned was that cast iron leaches bioavailable iron directly into food, 2 to 5 milligrams per serving when cooking acidic dishes like tomato gravy. A trial in Ethiopia found kids fed from iron pots saw hemoglobin jump nearly 2 grams per deciliter in 12 months. Meanwhile, the non-stick replacements were flaking Teflon into every meal. She seasoned that skillet with lard, wiped it with a rag, and hung it on the nail. The one she left behind still cooks better than anything on the shelf. She kept it next to the salt, a Folgers can with a bent spoon, sitting in cool bacon drippings, and whatever rendered off last night's dinner. Every black kitchen had one. Nutritionists called it a heart attack in a can. The American Heart Association told families to pour the grease down the drain and buy vegetable oil. But that recycled fat was mostly monounsaturated and saturated, both chemically stable at frying temperatures. The polyunsaturated seed oils that replaced it oxidized under heat, producing toxic aldehydes linked to inflammation. A study at De Montfort University found that lard generated far fewer harmful compounds during high heat cooking than sunflower or corn oil. She strained the fat through cheesecloth, let it cool, and spooned it back for tomorrow. That bent spoon in the Folgers can hold more wisdom than a decade of government food pyramids. The pot sat on the back of the stove from before church until well after the last plate was scraped clean. Nobody rushed it. It just simmered, low, steady, all day, while the kitchen filled with the smell so thick you could taste it before you lifted the lid. Modern cooking culture called this inefficient. Quick cook methods promise the same result in minutes, but collagen in bone-in meats converts to gelatin at around 160 degrees, and that transformation depends on both temperature and duration. The longer the simmer, the richer the yield of glycine, proline, and dissolved minerals drawn from cartilage and marrow. Those Sunday pots of stewed meat, neck bones settling into gravy, beans thickening against smoked pork, they were extracting nutrients no 30-minute shortcut can replicate. She knew the pot was ready by the way the house smelled. That was chemistry she learned standing next to her own mother, watching the lid rattle just enough to know the heat was right. Before the Crisco campaigns of the early 1900s convinced America that vegetable shortening was cleaner and more modern than animal fat, every black kitchen in the South kept lard within arm's reach. It went into biscuits, greased the cornbread pan, seasoned the greens, and fried the fish on Friday. When public health campaigns hit full speed in the 1960s, they painted lard as poison, the cause of heart disease and early death. What they never said was that lard is roughly 45% monounsaturated. Fat, the same heart-friendly fat in olive oil. It has less saturated fat than butter and none of the trans fats that riddled hydrogenated vegetable shortenings. It carries fat-soluble vitamins D and E and holds up under deep frying heat without breaking down into harmful compounds. Every biscuit she pulled from that oven, golden and flaky from rendered pork fat, was better for you than anything made with the processed alternatives that replaced it. If the fat she cooked with was the quiet medicine. The liquid left in the bottom of the greens pot was the loud one, dark as swamp water, smoky from the ham hock, sharp with vinegar. They called it potlikker, and grandmothers poured it into cups, sopped it with cornbread, or saved it for tomorrow's soup. Doctors said boiled vegetables lost their nutrition, and the liquid was just salty water. Researchers proved the opposite. Boiling extracts over 50% of flavonoids and 60% of vitamin C directly into the cooking water. That potlikker was loaded with vitamins A, C, and K, plus iron and calcium pulled from the collards during hours of slow simmering. The fat from the ham hock made carotenoids more absorbable since they are fat soluble. She was not wasting nutrition, she was concentrating it. The women who drank that broth were dosing themselves with exactly what their bodies needed. The bowl went on the counter before bed. Dried pintos covered in cold water, left to sit through the night, swelling slowly in the dark. By morning, the beans had doubled, and the water had turned cloudy with everything the soak pulled out. Quick soak methods and canned beans promised the same result without the weight. But that overnight soak was breaking down phytic acid, an anti-nutrient that binds to iron, zinc, and calcium and blocks the body from absorbing them. Studies show that soaking legumes 12 hours reduces phytic acid up to 70%, dramatically improving mineral absorption. The soak also breaks down oligosaccharides, complex sugars responsible for gas and bloating. She did not call it anti-nutrient reduction. She called it putting the beans on. And she poured off that cloudy water in the morning without a second thought, because her mother had done it and her mother before that, and nobody ever asked why. Nothing was wasted. The feet went into a pot with vinegar. The liver was sliced thin and fried with onions. The stomach was clean, turned inside out, scrubbed, and stuffed with potatoes. The tail fell apart in Sunday gravy. The ears were pickled. The skin was scored and roasted until it crackled. Health experts told black families to stop eating organ meats. Too much cholesterol, too much fat. What they ignored was that liver contains more bioavailable vitamin A, B12, and iron per ounce than any other food on earth. Heart meat is the richest natural source of coenzyme Q10, now sold in supplement bottles for $10 each. Pig feet and tails are dense with collagen, the same protein wellness companies now sell as powder for joint health. The whole animal, respected and consumed, delivered a nutritional profile that no boneless, skinless chicken breast could match. Those families ate snout to tail because they had to. Turns out they were eating better than anyone who chose not to. Friday night meant the deep pot came out, heavy, blackened, filled with enough saved drippings to submerge a full batch of fish. She knew by the sound when to drop the first fillet. Public health waged war on deep frying, and they had a point about frequency. But the real damage came from the switch. When families replaced animal fats with cheap polyunsaturated vegetable oils, they introduced a worse problem. Polyunsaturated fats are unstable at high temperatures. They oxidize rapidly, producing aldehydes and lipid peroxides linked to chronic inflammation. Saturated and monounsaturated fats resist this breakdown and hold their structure without the same toxic byproducts. The fish that came out of your grandmother's pot, fried in animal fat she had been carefully maintaining, was chemically safer than the same fish fried once in fresh canola oil. She judged the temperature by dropping a pinch of flour and watching how fast it sizzled. No thermometer, just decades of standing over that pot, listening. The smokehouse stood out back, small and dark, with hams hanging from hooks in the ceiling. Salt had been rubbed into the meat by hand, packed deep into every crevice, and then the wood was lit, hickory mostly, and smoke curled around the cuts for days. Health authorities linked salt-cured meats to blood pressure and cancer risk. But the science behind the technique is sound. Salt draws moisture through osmosis, reducing water activity below the threshold where bacteria like Clostridium botulinum can survive. Phenolic compounds in wood smoke act as natural antioxidants, preventing fat from going rancid, and as antimicrobials, forming a protective barrier on the surface. Those families were practicing food safety before the term existed. The smokehouse kept meat edible for months without electricity or refrigeration, just salt, smoke, time, and knowledge passed down through hands that never read a textbook. She cut the skin into strips, dropped them into hot fat, and waited. They hissed and curled, and by the time she fished them out with a slotted spoon, they were so crisp they shattered between your teeth. Kids fought over pieces, still warm from the pot. Cracklings were dismissed as junk food, pure fat, zero nutritional value. But pork skin is roughly 85% collagen by a dry weight. Collagen is the most abundant protein in the body, essential for joint health, gut lining, skin elasticity, and bone density. The wellness industry now sells hydrolyzed collagen powder for $30 to $50 a container. Your grandmother rendered hers for free on Saturday afternoon in a cast iron pot. The Cracklings kids snatched off the paper towel before they cooled were delivering the same protein people now stir into their smoothies and call self-care. But long before the collagen craze, before the supplement aisle existed, there was a quieter kind of kitchen science, one that saved civilizations. Women took dried field corn and soaked it in lye water made from hardwood ashes, stirring with long wooden paddles as the kernels swelled and the hulls loosened. What emerged was hominy, puffed, white, tender enough to eat whole or grind into grits. The process, learned from Native American neighbors as early as the 1800s, is called Nixamalization. Europeans who brought corn across the Atlantic skipped this step, and over 100,000 Americans died from pellagra, a niacin deficiency caused by corn that locks away its B3 behind chemical bonds the body cannot break without alkaline processing. Nixtamalization releases that bound niacin, increases calcium by 750%, improves protein quality, and destroys 90% of mycotoxins. The women who stirred that lye pot were performing biochemistry. They just called it making hominy. The bottle sat right next to the stove, apple cider vinegar, cap already loose because she reached for it so often. A splash went into the greens, a pour went into the beans, a few drops finished the broth. It sharpened everything, cut through the pork fat, and gave the pot a brightness that balanced the smoke and salt. Nobody explained why, you just did it because she did it. Acetic acid increases the solubility of non-heme iron, the kind in plant foods, making it far easier for the body to absorb. That splash also lowers the pH of the cooking liquid, preserving heat-sensitive vitamins like C and thiamine that degrade during long simmering. Vinegar is also a natural antimicrobial that inhibits harmful bacteria in stored food. She was boosting mineral absorption, preserving vitamins, and extending food safety with one twist of a bottle cap, and she never once called it science. The pot never really stopped. Monday, sashimi, roast chicken, left behind a carcass that went straight into water with an onion, a few peppercorns, and whatever scraps she had saved through the week. It simmered for a day, sometimes two, the liquid turning golden and rich, a layer of fat forming on top that she skimmed or stirred back in depending on the weather. Nutritionists dismissed bone broth as folk medicine. Then the wellness industry discovered it and started selling it for $12 a jar. Prolonged simmering extracts collagen from connective tissue, converting it into gelatin rich in glycine and proline, amino acids that support gut lining repair and joint health. The process draws calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus from the bones. She never bought a supplement. She just kept that pot going, and the broth she ladled into jars fed her family through every cold and every lean week when the groceries ran short. The crock sat in the corner, heavy, brown, with a chipped lid that never sealed right. Inside, peppers and cabbage sat in salt brine, bubbling slowly, smelling sharp and alive. Chow chow, pepper sauce, pickled watermelon rind. These were not recipes you looked up. They were things you watched someone make and then made yourself until the taste was close enough. Health inspectors would have shut it down. Extension agents warned against food sitting out. But lacto fermentation creates an acidic environment where beneficial lactobacillus thrive and harmful pathogens die. Those bacteria produce probiotics that modern gastroenterology now links to improved digestion, immune strength, and mental health through the gut-brain axis. The women who packed those crocks every fall were building gut health with salt and patience, decades before anyone called it a microbiome. While those crocks fermented in the corner, something simpler was happening on the stove. She tossed the whole onion into the pot, skin and all. The papery brown layers went right into the broth, turning the liquid a deep amber no amount of seasoning could produce. Modern cooks peel clean before cooking. What they throw away is the most concentrated source of quercetin on the entire plant, a flavonoid with anti-inflammatory and antihistamine properties now studied for its effects on blood pressure and cellular health. The outer skin holds significantly higher concentrations than the flesh beneath it. She was pulling medicine out of what everyone else treated as garbage. When the broth was done, the skins came out soft and spent, and she fished them out without ever knowing she had been practicing phytochemistry since before breakfast. She mixed the dough at night and left it on the counter under a damp cloth. No instant yeast, no rushing. By morning, it had doubled, and the kitchen smelled faintly sour, like something alive had been working while everyone slept. When commercial quick-rise yeast hit the market in the 1980s, home bakers abandoned slow fermentation almost overnight. Speed became the standard. But the long rise does something that speed cannot. It allows wild bacteria and natural enzymes to break down phytic acid in the flour, the same anti-nutrient found in beans and grains that blocks absorption of iron, zinc, and calcium. Slow fermentation also partially breaks down gluten proteins, which is why traditional sourdough is tolerated by some people who struggle with modern bread. The bread she pulled from the oven after that overnight rise was more digestible, more nutritious, and more flavorful than anything made with a packet of instant yeast and an hour on the counter. Now, artisan bakeries charge $8 a loaf for what she gave away to neighbors. At the table, the argument was always the same. Who got the thigh, not the breast? Nobody fought over the breast. The breast was dry, bland, and only good if you drowned it in gravy. The real eating was in the dark meat, the legs and thighs where the flavor lived, where the fat kept everything moist and the meat pulled clean from the bone. White America spent decades marketing the chicken breast as the healthy choice, lean, low fat, the protein of discipline. Meanwhile, dark meat contains more iron, more zinc, more riboflavin, more thiamine, more B6, and more B12 than white meat. The higher myoglobin content that gives it color is the same compound that delivers oxygen to muscle tissue, and more myoglobin means more nutrition. The preference for white meat was never science, it was marketing. The families who fought over drumsticks at Sunday dinner were eating the better cut every single time, and they knew it, not because a label told them, but because the taste told them first. The garden ran along the back fence, tomatoes tied to stakes with torn bed sheets, pole beans climbing a wire frame, squash spreading wider than planned. Greens grew in rows so tight you could barely walk between them. This was how you ate. When urbanization pulled black families into apartments and away from land, backyard gardens became one of the first casualties. But produce loses nutrients from the moment it is harvested. Vitamin C degrades within hours, and supermarket greens can lose half their nutritional value by the time they reach the shelf. Garden to table within the same day preserves peak nutrient density. She picked the tomatoes warm off the vine, and the greens still dusty from the dirt, and what she carried inside was more alive than anything wrapped in plastic. Those gardens are mostly concrete now. If you knew, you knew, and if you had to ask, you were not from one of those kitchens. A clean copper penny dropped into the pot of greens before the lid went on kept the color bright and vivid through hours of cooking. Without it, the greens turned dull and army olive after long simmering. People called it superstition, an old and wives' trick with no basis in anything real. But copper ions interact with chlorophyll, the pigment that makes greens green, and stabilize it against heat degradation. That is basic chemistry. Copper is also an essential trace mineral the body needs for iron metabolism, nerve function, and connective tissue formation, and small amounts leaching from that penny into the acidic cooking liquid would have contributed to daily intake. She dropped the penny in, put the lid on, and hours later pulled out greens as vivid as the day they were picked. Nobody explained it. Nobody needed to. The color told you everything you needed to know about who taught her to cook. Raw salads belonged to other people's kitchens. In hers, the tomatoes went into the pot, stewed down with onions and a little sugar until they collapsed into a thick, sweet gravy that clung to rice and soaked through cornbread. Health campaigns of the 1980s and 90s pushed raw vegetables as the gold standard, claiming that cooking destroyed nutrients. For tomatoes, the opposite is true. Heat breaks down the cell walls and releases lycopene, a powerful antioxidant linked to reduced risk of heart disease and certain cancers. Cooking increases lycopene bioavailability by roughly 35% compared to eating tomatoes raw. Adding fat, and she always did, whether it was bacon drippings or a spoonful of lard, further enhances absorption because lycopene is fat soluble. The stewed tomatoes that went over rice on a Tuesday night, the ones she made because fresh meat was 2 days away and something had to stretch, were delivering more cancer-fighting nutrition than any raw tomato salad ever could. A small square of fatback went into the pot before anything else. White, firm, cut from the slab in the icebox. It rendered slowly, filling the kitchen with a smell that meant dinner was starting. Nutritionists begged families to stop. They said fat was clogging arteries and vegetables should be steamed clean. But fat is not decoration in a pot of greens. It is a delivery system. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat soluble, meaning the body cannot absorb them without dietary fat present in the same meal. Carotenoids like beta-carotene, found in every dark green she simmered, require fat for absorption. Without it, those vitamins pass straight through. That square of fatback unlocked nutrition that steamed vegetables eaten dry could never deliver. She seasoned with fat because it made the food taste right. Science confirmed she had been right all along, but by then, nobody was listening to the women who already knew. Corn husks wrapped around seasoned meal, banana leaves folded tight around fish and rice, collard leaves steamed shut around pork and spice. The wrapping was not presentation, it was technology. Gullah Geechee cooks along the Carolina and Georgia coast used this method for generations, carrying a technique with direct roots to West African and Caribbean foodways where leaf wrapping was the primary cooking method long before metal pots arrived. Wrapping food in leaves before roasting creates a sealed, moist environment that steams the contents from within. This preserves water-soluble vitamins like C and B complex that escape during dry roasting or open pot boiling. The leaves themselves contribute trace minerals and chlorophyll compounds to the food as they soften in the heat. Modern food science calls this technique en papillote when French chefs do it with parchment. When Black grandmothers did it with corn husks and collard leaves, it was considered primitive. Same method, same results, different respect. The salt was measured by the handful. She packed it into pork shoulders and slabs of beef, rubbed it into every surface until the meat turned pale, then hung the cuts from rafters in a cool back room where air moved slow. Weeks later, what came down was dense, concentrated, and intensely flavored, a preserved protein that could last months with no refrigeration. Modern guidelines demonized heavy salting and linked sodium to hypertension. But high salt concentrations reduce water activity to levels where spoilage bacteria cannot reproduce, creating shelf-stable meat through osmotic pressure alone. The curing process also encourages beneficial lactic acid bacteria on the surface, the same organisms now celebrated in fermented foods. These women preserve food for winter using a technique older than written language, and the meat that came down from those rafters carried flavor no freezer could replicate. Dandelion greens pulled from the yard, poke salad gathered from the ditch before the leaves got too big, turnip tops, mustard so sharp it bit the back of your throat. She cooked them all, the greens other people sprayed with weed killer or mowed over without a thought. Bitter meant medicine in those kitchens, and the science agrees. Bitter greens like dandelion and mustard are among the most nutrient-dense foods on earth, packed with vitamins A, C, and K, along with calcium, iron, and potassium at concentrations that dwarf iceberg, lettuce, and romaine. Dandelion greens contain more beta-carotene than carrots per serving. Some, like purslane, are one of the richest plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids. The bitterness itself signals the presence of glucosinolates and flavonoids, compounds under active study for anti-cancer properties. She picked what grew free, cooked it with fatback, and fed her family the most nutritious greens money could not buy because nobody was selling what grew wild in the yard. If the greens she gathered required knowledge of the land, what happened at the stove required something harder to name. She never measured, not once. The flour went in until the dough felt right. The salt was a pinch from fingers that knew how much a pinch should be. The oil was a pour judged by the sound it made hitting the pan. Cooking schools teach measurement as the foundation of consistency, but sensory feedback, the look of the batter, the smell of the roux, the sound of the sizzle, is a more accurate guide than any printed recipe. Experienced cooks adjust to variations in humidity, altitude, and ingredient freshness that no measuring cup can account for. What she called cooking by feel, neuroscience calls expert procedural knowledge, pattern recognition refined through thousands of repetitions until the body knows before the mind does. You cannot find that in a book. You had to be there, standing close, watching her hands. When someone in the house fell sick, the medicine came from the kitchen before anyone thought about a doctor. Hot broth with enough pepper sauce to make your eyes water. A cup of bone stock with cayenne stirred in until the surface shimmered red. She would sit on the edge of the bed and hold the cup while you drank it, and by the time you finished, your sinuses were open. Your forehead was damp with sweat, and something inside felt like it had shifted back into place. Capsaicin, the compound that makes peppers burn, is now recognized as a potent anti-inflammatory, a natural decongestant, and a pain modulator that activates the same nerve receptors targeted by pharmaceutical treatments. Combined with the glycine and minerals in slow-simmered broth, it was a home remedy with real pharmacological action. She did not need the studies. She just knew that when the fever came, you gave them the hot broth with the pepper, and you sat with them until it worked. The sitting was part of the medicine too, and nobody has figured out how to put that in a bottle. The kids ate the liver first. That was the rule. Before the fried chicken, before the pork chops, before anything they actually wanted, they ate what was good for them, liver and onions on a Tuesday night, and you sat at that table until the plate was clean. It was not cruelty, it was strategy. Children's bodies are building bone, blood, brain tissue, and immune systems at a rate that demands concentrated nutrition. Liver delivers more vitamin A, iron, B12, folate, and copper per ounce than any other single food, nutrients critical for childhood development that are now commonly supplemented in gummy form. The women who insisted their children eat organ meats were not punishing picky eaters. They were front-loading the most nutrient-dense food available during the years when it mattered most. Those kids complained every time, and every time they ate it. And the ones who are grown now, the ones who remember that kitchen, every single one of them says the same thing. She was right. The jar was heavy and dark, and it poured slow, thick as tar, sweet but with a bite underneath that white sugar never had. Sorghum syrup and blackstrap. Molasses were the sweeteners of kitchens that could not afford refined sugar, and the women who used them caught grief for it. Refined white sugar was progress. It was clean, modern, civilized. What they were using looked primitive, but sorghum syrup retains B vitamins, iron, and potassium stripped away during sugar refining. Blackstrap molasses is one of the richest plant-based sources of iron and calcium on Earth. A single tablespoon delivers nearly 20% of daily iron needs. Both carry antioxidant compounds entirely absent from white sugar. The biscuits she drizzled with sorghum on a cold morning, the gingerbread dark with molasses, the sweet potatoes glazed until they shone, they were delivering minerals that the refined alternative could never match. She used what she had was better. Nobody ate standing up, nobody ate alone. You sat down, bowed your head, and waited until everybody was served before you picked up your fork. The meal took as long as it took, and leaving early was not an option unless you wanted a look that could stop your heart. Researchers have since found that communal meals eaten slowly reduce cortisol, improve digestion through proper parasympathetic activation, and lead to better nutrient absorption because the body processes food more efficiently when not under stress. Kids who eat regular family meals show lower rates of obesity and stronger emotional resilience across nearly every study. She did not know the science. She just knew that when people sat together and ate slow, something felt right. The table was where you learned who you were. Nobody teaches that at a drive-through window. She never wrote it down. Not the measurements, not the method, not a single instruction for the dishes that held her family together for 40 years. You learned by standing next to her and paying attention, watching how much flour she scooped, how long she stirred when she pulled the pan from the heat. If you asked her to explain, she would laugh and say she just knew. Cognitive scientists call this procedural memory, knowledge stored in the motor cortex through repeated physical practice, the same system that governs how musicians play and athletes move. Procedural memory transfers more effectively through observation and imitation than through written instruction, which is exactly why standing in that kitchen mattered more than any recipe card ever could. But when she died, the watching stopped, and the ones who had not stood close enough, the ones who thought there would be more time, spent years trying to recreate what their hands had never learned. The recipe card survived. The woman who never needed one did not. Blood pudding with grits was a breakfast dish that appeared on rural black tables during hog killing season throughout the 1960s, using every part of the animal with reverence. Fresh pig blood was collected and mixed with cooked rice, onions, and spices before being stuffed into casings and simmered until firm. The pudding was then sliced thick and fried until the outside crisped while the inside stayed soft and richly seasoned. Served alongside creamy grits swimming in butter, the combination provided enough sustenance to fuel a full day of labor. The taste was earthy and deeply savory, with the iron-rich pudding balanced by the mild corn flavor of the grits. Though it made outsiders squeamish, families who grew up eating it remembered the dish with fondness. It represented the complete use of the hog and the wisdom of wasting nothing. Oxtail stew with butter beans was Sunday dinner royalty, a dish that required time and attention, but rewarded with flavors that seemed to echo through generations. Oxtails were seared until caramelized, then braised slowly with tomatoes, onions, garlic, thyme, and allspice until the meat surrendered from the bone. Butter beans were added in the final hour, absorbing the rich gravy while holding their shape. The marrow from the bones melted into the sauce, creating natural richness that no store-bought product could replicate. Served over rice or with crusty bread, this stew was reserved for occasions that mattered. Those who mastered oxtail stew earned reputations that spread through churches and neighborhoods, their pots requested at every gathering. Hogmaw, stuffed with sausage, was a holiday centerpiece in many black households during the 1960s, transforming the pig's stomach into something spectacular. The maw was cleaned thoroughly inside and out, then stuffed with a mixture of homemade sausage, potatoes, onions, and cabbage, seasoned with sage and black pepper. Sewn shut with kitchen twine, it was roasted slowly for hours until the outer skin turned golden and crispy, while the stuffing inside became tender and flavorful. Sliced thick at the table, each piece revealed layers of meat and vegetables bound together by the maw's natural gelatin. Families served it for Christmas, New Year's, or whenever company was expected. The dish demonstrated mastery over ingredients that others might reject, proving that skill could elevate anything into a feast. Chitterlings with hot sauce carried the weight of history in every bite, a dish born from necessity that became a celebration of resilience. Pig intestines were cleaned for hours, boiled slowly with onions, garlic, vinegar, and bay leaves until tender, then served steaming with hot sauce that cut through the richness. The smell was unmistakable, filling kitchens and drifting through neighborhoods. In the 1970s, chitterlings appeared at holiday gatherings and Sunday dinners where elders passed down the knowledge of proper preparation. The texture was chewy and gelatinous, the flavor deep and earthy, balanced by vinegar and heat. Though many younger generations have never tasted them, chitterlings remain a symbol of making treasure from what others discarded. Turtle soup with sherry was a dish that bridged poverty cooking and fine dining in black communities along southern rivers during the 1960s. Snapping turtles were caught by brave souls willing to risk their fingers, then cleaned and the meat removed from the shell to reveal flesh that tasted like a cross between chicken and fish. The meat was simmered for hours with onions, celery, hard-boiled eggs, and spices until it fell apart into the rich broth. A splash of sherry added just before serving gave the soup an unexpected elegance that surprised anyone who tasted it. Served at church suppers and family gatherings, turtle soup proved that resourceful cooking could produce something genuinely refined. The dish connected families to rivers and waterways that provided free protein for those who knew how to harvest it. Smothered liver and onions divided households but fed families with iron-rich protein when budgets were tight. Beef or pork liver was sliced thin, soaked in milk to temper its metallic edge, then dredged in seasoned flour and fried until golden. Mountains of sliced onions were cooked down in the same skillet until they collapsed into sweet, caramelized strands, then piled atop the liver with rich gravy poured over everything. The combination was earthy and savory, with onions providing sweetness that balanced the liver's intensity. In the 1970s, liver was among the cheapest proteins available, appearing regularly on weeknight tables. Children often resisted until that first bite revealed something surprisingly delicious. This dish remains a memory of skill, transforming humble ingredients into meals worth remembering. Pig ear sandwiches were a Saturday afternoon staple at juke joints and fish fry stands across the South during the 1960s, offering cheap protein with bold flavor that satisfied hungry workers. The ears were cleaned meticulously, then simmered until tender before being sliced thin and fried in hot grease until the edges turned crispy and golden. The texture was unlike anything else, chewy and crunchy at once with a rich porky taste that lingered on the tongue. Piled onto soft white bread with hot sauce, pickles, and sometimes a smear of mustard, these sandwiches cost pennies but delivered satisfaction worth far more. Men would line up at roadside stands, passing coins through windows and receiving warm paper-wrapped bundles in return. The sandwich represented the genius of using what others discarded and creating something people craved. Neckbones and rice was a weeknight staple that stretched a few dollars into a meal hearty enough for an entire family. During the 1970s, pork neckbones were browned in a heavy pot, then slow simmered with onions, garlic, and seasoning until the meat fell from the bone. The bones released marrow and collagen, creating natural gravy that clung to every grain of rice. This was not fancy food, but deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that warmed from the inside. Mothers made it when the pantry was thin, knowing neck bones cost pennies, yet delivered flavor that expensive cuts could never match. Children learned to gnaw the bones clean, savoring every bit of meat. This dish taught that dignity and deliciousness could come from the humblest ingredients. Raccoon stew with dumplings was a dish that proved Black cooks could transform any ingredient into something worth savoring during the lean years of the 1960s. The raccoon was hunted, cleaned, and soaked for days to remove any gamey taste before being cut into chunks and browned in rendered fat. Onions, carrots, and potatoes were added to the pot along with bay leaves and thyme. Then everything simmered for hours until the meat fell apart at the touch of a fork. Dumplings made from flour, salt, and a bit of lard were dropped into the bubbling stew, puffing up as they absorbed the rich broth. The finished dish was ladled into deep bowls, each spoonful carrying tender meat, soft vegetables, and pillowy dumplings. This was the kind of meal that fed entire families from a single pot, turning an unusual protein into pure comfort. Hogmaw stuffed with sausage was the centerpiece of holiday tables in Black households throughout the 1970s, a dish that demanded respect and patience in equal measure. The hog's stomach was cleaned meticulously for hours, then stuffed with seasoned sausage, potatoes, onions, and cabbage before slow roasting until golden and crisp. This dish filled homes with an aroma that announced celebration. Families gathered as it was sliced thick and served alongside greens, each portion carrying the richness of rendered fat and spiced meat. The stomach itself cost almost nothing, yet transformed into something that fed a crowd and honored tradition. Today, it has nearly disappeared, but those who remember it recall the pride of serving something so deeply rooted in heritage. Those kitchens went quiet, and science arrived too late to thank the hands that knew. Like, subscribe, and tell us which one she got right.